This is Toon Talk Weekly, episode 240. This week, Brad and I dive back into some comic books when we watch the MTV 1995 series, The Maxx.
One woman got away by running 3 blocks on a broken foot. Sometimes it's luck that saves them. Sometimes it's fate.
Hey, Fridge, here's another one. You ever seen anybody with so much change in their purse, huh, Fridge? I say, you ever seen anybody with... What? Who are you?
Yeah, usually it's fate. But sometimes it's me.
Yes, and sometimes it's us. All right, everybody, freeze.
Damn, I was talking out loud again.
The day just keeps getting better.
Boy. Where is that kid?
Hey everybody, it's Tuesday once again. That means it's time for another episode of the weekly cartoon podcast, Toon Talk Weekly. That's of course this show. Thank you once again for joining us this week to chat all about cartoons. My name is Jake Williams, but I brought along my good friend Brad Chmielewski to talk about some cartoons. What's up, man?
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well. You just got back from a trip. How you feeling?
Yeah, I avoided that snow here in the Midwest for a couple days, so that wasn't too bad.
But now you came back and it's like, well, someone's got a shovel.
I know, right? So, yeah, luckily my wife had done a bunch of the shoveling, so I just had to do some as we got more snow. But
Yeah.
she did a good chunk of it, so I thank her for that.
It's like, it's just one of those moments where every time I think about moving, I'm like, man, the West Coast really does seem pretty cool. It's like when I think about snow is when I think about moving.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And dude, it completely missed like the East Coast period. There's like no snow on the ground in New York. My family back home in Maine like don't have any snow. It's like just here, just like this one spot in particular got crammed.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Kind of nuts. So,
But yeah, luckily I didn't have any flight delays or anything like that, so that's a plus.
That's kind of surprising. I guess you were gone while the big snow happened, and then it was done by the time you flew out.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, glad you made it home safe. We got some cartoons in this week. This week we're talking about a series from 1995 that aired on MTV called The Maxx. And this show, I got to be honest, I never watched this show, but I definitely remember it airing at the time. Well, 95, I would have been like, wow, I would have been like 8. So
Okay.
or 8 or 9, you know. And I remember this show just seeing like, maybe I saw like the title card or something like that, or saw ads or something, but it kind of scared me. And it's been an image in my mind for the longest time, knowing nothing about this cartoon or the comic it's based on. The idea of the Maxx as a character has kind of like always been like this weird dark thing in my head for some stupid reason. I'm not sure what that's all about.
Well, I had the comics.
Oh, okay.
So, I had read those and had, the series that's on MTV is basically the comics, board for board. You could watch them. It's basically you could read along with the comics.
I mean, that's kind of awesome because then you could actually get some out of it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll talk about kind of the style sort of as we get into some episodes here. But yeah, very much so. There are times when it looks like it's straight ripped out of a panel of a comic book, just the way that they handle the animation and the presentation of the show.
Yeah, and so this aired like after Aeon Flux, right? Or before, whatever that like MTV Liquid or Twisted Tunes or whatever that MTV animation block was.
Yeah, they had a programming block called Oddities for a while.
Oddities, okay.
And yeah, actually, some of the other shows you mentioned, though. So I was trying to find these episodes online. Usually Hulu, Netflix, or like a company website, or pretty much Godsends. They find whatever you're looking for. But in this case, it's one of those weird things where like you can't find old stuff. When brands move on, like MTV is a very different brand today than it was 95. when they move on, they don't want to show you like this was a part of it, you know?
Okay.
But there was something called like Liquid Television or something, or liquidtelevision.com. But if you try to go to that website, it forwards you to MTV, and there's no way to find this show online, which is too bad because apparently all the episodes were online, including some of those other shows you mentioned were on this Liquid Television site.
Yeah, I think they also used like that to air anime too. Like it was like 2 hours of like EM Flux, or it was like an hour of EM Flux in the Maxx, or EM Flux and Beavis and Butthead, and then like an hour of Gundam and some other like weird anime that you never really got to see the full series of.
Right. So it was like the predecessor to Toonami on Cartoon Network, right? Like,
but way weirder and creepier and just darker because the audience on MTV was, in theory, older. So
right, and MTV was like, I don't want to call them like counterculture, but at the time they were sort of like this. They were tapping into what the culture was at the time for young, like 20, 30 something year olds, and also like teens at the time, like what sort of like music they might be into, or what sort of jokes and things they might tell to one another.
Right. I was reading like this YouTube book, and they were talking about MTV, and MTV basically had so much money because studios and artists just basically wanted their video on MTV, so they never had to pay for any of the videos, any of the music to go up there. So they were basically like basically MTV was a commercial. The whole thing is a giant commercial for, I guess, to sell albums, to sell concert tickets, or in this case, sell people on the comic, sell people on buying the box set to these animes. Like when you think of MTV that way, it's just like a big commercial. It's really funny. And
it was so popular and so big at that time that it's like, of course I would, I need people to see my video. I better pay you X amount of money. They could probably charge whatever they wanted to, and people would have paid it.
Right.
I saw some special recently too about Madonna, and when she was coming up, and people asking about, she's usually sort of in the conversation of some of the greatest or most iconic artists of all time in music. And this special was basically talking about like, well, I think it's because of MTV, like that she's so popular because she knew how to sort of reinvent herself in these interesting ways for television at the time, for a channel that people were watching. And if maybe TV hadn't rolled around, or maybe if it was the internet instead, she wouldn't have been as popular as she ended up, ultimately becoming. And who's to really say? But I don't know. It's kind of you can't really state how important in a way to culture, to especially us as kind of growing kids and entering our teens around that era, like that MTV really was. Like that was the cool stuff to watch.
You're right, yeah.
And now I feel like an old man because I don't get the programming at all on MTV. So
that's not the point of the channel anymore. So
no, yeah, it's got a very different audience than it does now. But so my comment about Toonami is really interesting to me, at least because I don't know what the landscape was like for anime, or let's just call them weird shows in general. Those aren't exclusive to one another. Anime is not necessarily weird, but I don't know what the American landscape for anime and access to that, as well as like independent, or let's not call it independent, but these sort of weird off the wall type of show ideas. I don't know what the market was like for that in the 90s. I would imagine it was much harder to find American anime, or at least dubbed anime at that point. And so,
I remember having to go to Suncoast Video and, seeing what new VHSs were in.
And hope they had like a new anime you might want to watch or something.
Yeah, I'd be like, all right, well, here's part 14 of this one. All right, this is what I'm getting, and I can get 2 episodes. Here's my $20. Thanks.
Yeah, it's just kind of crazy. So a program like Oddities that kind of fosters that probably, or I don't know, I'm going to venture to say that it led to things like Toonami being popular and Adult Swim kind of becoming what it was. Like, while Oddities might not have been around forever or a long time, or might not even be the most MTV thing that you remember when you think of the network, it's cool to think that a show like the Maxx enabled a comic book to get wider sort of notice and to tell this story in a visual different way. Gosh, I don't even know, like, I wish that in my research I had found, like, what was the first comic book that was adapted in sort of this manner to an animated show, where, like, You know what I mean? Like the Maxx plays out like it is a comic book still. It's not like just a straight adaptation where it's like, I'm just going to tell stories now.
Right, yeah.
So kind of interesting. So you had all the comics, so I'm guessing you probably also watched the show when it came out.
I probably did, and like we're watching it here. I watched a couple of the episodes. I remember all this, like it's like super familiar, and I'm like, I've seen this before. But it's not good enough that it sticks with you, that you remember details like about it. So it's one of those shows where you watch and you can watch again and again or years later and be like, I remember this, but it was so strange and different that I don't remember what happened.
Yeah, I mean, kind of in the same vein as my comment about like it sort of weirdly haunting me is like, I can remember that title card. I can remember the character of the Maxx, what he looks like, but I don't remember anything about the show. So who knows if I watched it or not.
Sure.
So the show was in 95, but the actual comic book was created by Sam Kieth, came out in 93. Image Comics published that. And it mentions that, I didn't look into all the comics. I think there's like 35 or 36 total comics of the Maxx, but only 1 season and 13 episodes of the show, so much less really time to tell these stories. The series actually covered, the animated series rather, covered Darker Image number 1, the Maxx number 1 and 2, and number 1 through 11 of the regular series. So some notes I found were basically that fans of the Maxx might be a little disappointed in the animated series because it doesn't get time to dive into the backstories of some of these characters. And what I found interesting about that was that I read a lot of background about this one character named Sarah. It sounds like there is a major turning point in the story of the Maxx, like the history of the comic, that A, I didn't get to in my viewing of 4 or 5 episodes, and B, the show doesn't get a ton of time to dive into because it's only 1 season.
Right.
So kind of a bummer if you know there's more and you were excited for it to be animated, right? It'd be like Game of Thrones only getting 2 seasons, and then people being like, what, there's like 3 more books.
Right. Come on.
Yeah.
Give it to us.
Some of the production details, some interesting things I noticed, and I'm sure this will come up again as we talk about the episodes. There's frequent changes in animation style. I almost want to call this like a mixed media thing, this show, because there's lots of full detail, full like comic book looking art, and the characters might move in stills, or it might just push in on stills like an anime might. But then they might cut to a shot where there are these simplified cartoons where the detail's gone. They might just be one color. They do this a lot with the those little creatures with the big heads and sharp teeth and stuff. A lot of times they ended up being like blobby, right? But dude, there were shots of 3D CGI, which was very primitive, but it was there. And did you notice at least one shot of live action? There was a scene in, I think, episode 1 where the Maxx gets he tries to save a woman, and the police ended up taking him to the police station, and he's in the back of the police car. The 2 cops talking are silhouettes of people on green screen.
Oh, I saw that, and I was watching that, and I'm like, man, the detail on those cops talking is like really good. And I was like, I'm gonna have to save this as a reference if we have silhouettes talking. But oh my gosh, okay, that it's real people makes a lot more sense.
Say, Baker, the call mentioned a possible female victim. Do you remember any woman back there?
Nah, if there was a victim or something, I think we'd have seen her.
Yeah, I guess. What do we do with Laughing Boy?
I don't know, we could hold him on. There wasn't no assault victim, no muggers, no little blue man, nothing.
So we run him in for loitering as usual.
You know, it must be great, being nuts. You get to dress up in purple underwear, mumble to yourself, do whatever you want, and have other people clean up your mess.
Yeah, like us.
Oh, God.
All right, let's pipe down back there.
I hate this.
It looked off enough, but I appreciate the attention to detail there, which was kind of fun that these 2 people, who I would almost be willing to bet, I couldn't find any behind the scenes, that those were people that worked on the show, like animators or something.
Yeah, it wasn't off to me, it just looked too good.
Yeah, the lip sync was way too spot on.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, that looks like a real guy talking. So the main characters we'll probably mention today, of course, the Maxx, the main hero. He thinks he's a hero. I'm not really sure what to make of him. It seems like he has good intentions, but the whole series kind of exists in this dark city where things are gloom and doom all the time. And also there's this other realm that people kind of can exist on. I think they call it Pangea in this, but it's like a primitive, almost outback, almost like a Australian outback kind of thing. But I can't tell if it's I don't think it's a real place. I think it's like a subconscious that you can live in.
Yeah.
Very deep idea for a cartoon. So anyway, the Maxx kind of goes between these sort of realms, but he can't control it. It almost seems like the mask or part of his whatever superhero characteristic.
Or he's just schizophrenic.
Yeah. He kind of just warps back and forth without being able to. So then we have Julie Winters, who is a freelance a freelance social worker. So she helps people in the city with their problems, but she's also in the outback as like Queen of the Jungle or Queen Julie or something like that.
Right.
And so I think this is where the connection between her and the Maxx comes from, which is the Maxx in that realm, in his Pangea, is trying to protect his queen. And so it kind of carries over that he thinks he needs to do it in the city as well.
Right.
We have the villain, the arch nemesis, Mr. Gone, or at least in the first few episodes that I saw, which is he's kind of this villain man, and also he was described as a serial rapist on the internet. So that was like, okay, it's a pretty dark show. I got to be honest. Like,
yeah, I guess the one up. Yeah, he does just steal and kidnap women. You don't know what happens.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that comment comes from the comic books can go way darker with it. There's obviously so much that can be approved for television, but I guess I could have put an NSFW tag on the show, but yeah, the show is pretty dark, like honestly. Mm-hmm. So, but he seems to be able to control going between his conscious and subconscious worlds. We have Sarah, who I met at the very end of one episode, so I don't know a whole lot about her, but she's a main character. If you're a huge Maxx fan, I apologize. I believe her to be a big character that I know nothing about. I didn't get that far yet. And I guess you could call the sort of like army of demonic little dudes. Like you could call them characters too that show up quite a bit.
Yeah, because they're white in Pangea and they're black in the real world. Yeah.
Yeah, and they sort of like, I guess they're more like they feel more demonic or like evil in the real world. But also there's a weird thing that they do in the real world where it's not explained to you at first, but then you learn later that if they're dressed up as something, so the example is they're dressed up as an old lady. If a human sees them and doesn't know that it's an is or what an is, they will actually see an old lady.
Okay, yeah.
It's kind of like it's like a weird Matrix-y, like hologram kind of thing, right? Like you see what you think you see. So yeah, let's talk about a few episodes of the Maxx. I think I caught the first maybe 3 or 4 episodes of the 13-episode series, so got a little bit of a handle on kind of who the main characters were and that sort of thing. And to an extent, the very first few episodes kind of introduce you to the world, to each character. But man, crazy Sin City vibes from this, which is also a comic graphic novel series, right?
Yeah, so yeah, I watched the first couple, and yeah, it has very dark, detailed vibe to it. Everything is grungy, and it feels dirty when you're watching it. Like I don't know if there's a better way to describe it. It just feels like, man, so much detail was put into just like the garbage laying on the side of the road.
It's and it's like a grungier, dirtier version of like the dirtiest areas of Gotham City that Batman wants you to think exist. Right. Something about this just feel. I mean, the Maxx dude in the city lives in a cardboard box. Like, how down on his luck could this guy be? But what I found interesting about it, I guess, the Sin City thing, what reminded me of that, obviously, which was a film way later, was all the monologues. It was like so much of the Maxx talking to himself, but like through us to like let us know, like, here's how I'm feeling. I'm not sure if I'm actually a hero, but I exist here, and now I'm having this episode. He actually makes a comment many, many times, like, "Oh crap, I was talking out loud again," because people call him out on it.
Right. Yeah. So because he's schizophrenic, man.
Well, there's some weird comedy bits that like break up stuff, but then there's also like there's also a dude kidnapping girls, and it's kind of creepy. Like the show has a very interesting tone, but I'd say mostly a dark one, mostly kind of a weird, like uncomfortable one. In lots of ways. It's also, in a weird way, the style is kind of like overly sexualized, especially Julie's outfit, which is like her underwear, but like jeans with like crazy holes in them, which is super weird.
Right. I think in the episode 1, she's helping somebody, And he's like, you dress funny for a social worker, kind of like a prostitute. And she like takes offense to it.
Yeah.
Like basically like, I have a job and I have a place. Like, shut up, guy with the vomit blanket.
Yeah, there were lots of comments. I think it was episode somewhere in the beginning there where Mr. Gone, the villain dude, makes a comment about kidnapping the women, how like they dress a certain way, sometimes no means yes or something like that. And I was like, holy crap, like today's political climate, 2018, this is a very not okay show, like not a PC show, at least the material isn't, right? And the Maxx, straight up, is not the only, this is by far probably not the only entertainment property out there that deals with these sorts of situations, right? With kidnapping, with whatever. So it's very interesting sometimes to watch things with the lens of today, especially today. Just like 2018 in general has been sort of this thing that is anti what the Maxx is showing. And I was like kind of doubly uncomfortable, I guess, watching it.
I guess yes and no. Like, I see what you're saying, but then you have Julie, the social worker. She's basically the main character that's kind of making sure these men on the street are, taken care of. So she's kind of the leader of, like, are in control there. And if you think of the other show that, like, ran with this, it was Aeon Flux, which was another powerful woman show. Yeah. So we're kind of, you
can see it a couple different ways. Because when you make it sound like that too, you can kind of consider in a weird way Mr. Gone and the Maxx both like the groveling, like lower men of this show, who were both after her attention, after her sort of desire, I guess. There's even where
we get the scene where she goes to the police station. I think it's in episode 1, and the cop is like, "Why do you associate with this kind of person," talking about the Maxx, when you could have basically someone like me? And she, shows her dominance of being like, I could choose whoever I want to be with or whoever I want to help with. Yeah.
I think that's probably the better way to look at it. I was looking at it, I got a whiff of controversy and I was like, I don't know, man. And that stuck in my head the entire watch. But yeah, episode 1 was very much like the Maxx trying to save a woman, but ends up getting sent to the police station, and then that woman ends up getting kidnapped by Mr. Gone anyway. He was trying to save her from a mugging from two like low life criminal kind of guys. Episode 2 and 3 kind of run together for me, but there was an introduction to the Is and kind of the second world, the Pangea, where there's a whole monologue in the beginning with a guy pumping gas, saying like, this town sucks. No one, nothing ever happens to me. And then a fight breaks out between the Maxx and Mr. Gone on top of the hood of his car. And he's like, he makes a comment. He's like, oh, I bet stuff happens to those guys all the time. Like, yeah, exactly what you're seeing right now. And that's where I learned of the Is like dressing as old ladies, and he couldn't see that kind of thing.
Huh? Never noticed that. Weird. If I was to tug on this thing really hard. Oh, I get it. It's that guy's cape. I was afraid I broke it. Of course, now I got 2 big guys fighting on the hood of my car.
Give it up, Brer Lappin. You know Julie Winters is the one I want. She's a strong one. The one who pulls at your strings.
What are you talking about? And who the hell are you?
Right, I think that must have been episode 3, because episode 2 ended where they were kind of on top of the gas station.
Oh, that's right. And this is a show where we couldn't really, I think we both saw basically the same episodes, because you can't really jump around or else you kind of miss what they were trying to tell you.
Yeah, because it's a story. It's like anime. It's like a lot of the shows that were running on the channel at that time where you had to watch them all. Otherwise, you didn't know what was happening.
Right, yeah. So, and there was a showdown between. So the final episode I believe I watched was it was 3 or 4, and Julie actually gets kidnapped by Mr. Gone. Mr. Gone actually like takes her, but it looks to be that Julie actually breaks out with a tooth from one of the Ises, which was like really sharp tooth. She like cuts herself loose, and I'm to believe that she kills Mr. Gone, yet somehow his power or being or something is still fighting with the Maxx and describing to the Maxx who he is and what he is. I think he even says, by the way, Mr. Gon does in the intro kind of like theme or cinematic, talks about like, well, I can control going back and forth, so I'm just going to keep messing with this guy.
Right, like I could help them.
Yeah.
He's basically like, I could help them, but it's more fun to mess with them. Like he's almost like, if you think about like the doctor of this whole thing, like I could give you the medicine to cure this, but it's way more fun to see where this all goes.
Yeah, so in that way, sort of the chaotic evil of like a Joker or something. It's like, well, I'm just here to see what happens, you know?
Yeah.
But so I'm under the impression that the final episode I saw is that Mr. Gon is actually gone, and then we meet Sarah, who goes and talks to Julie, who seems to be this depressed teenager or something like that. But I'm interested to see where her character goes going forward, because I was able to find a couple more episodes, so I'll have to check those out. But
nice.
Yeah, man, no, kind of a cool show for a show that I had never really watched and only remember seeing the character.
Right, yeah.
Was it fun for you revisiting this as someone who had actually read some of the comics?
Yeah, and like I said, it's very familiar, and I remember it all, and the style is a really fun take on the comic book world, because, you know, we have a lot of animated comic books now. Like that's a thing where the panels are animated and, you know, stuff just kind of slides in or comes forward, but this kind of takes that and goes a little farther. So it's cool to see that.
Yeah, some of my favorite shots were not even the fully animated stuff, which, by the way, some of the character animation was great when it was fully animated. Especially the Is had a very bouncy Looney Tunes almost feel to it. But some of my favorite stuff was when they would just cut to an interesting framing with a panel, and the voiceover or music would be happening, or the sound effects, and you didn't need motion. Like it was like I was reading the comic.
Yeah, I wonder how much was aesthetic decision and how much was crap, we don't have enough time. Like MTV wants this show in, 6 weeks. We gotta get to it. We'll make that a still shot. We'll spend money and time doing these ises because they're kind of like a little more fun, a little more goofy, that might appeal to the audience, and we can just have these stills and kind of these darker shots at times.
Yeah, I bet it's probably a mix of both, but also like, hey, there's cool art, like let's just show it,
Maybe. Yeah.
But yeah, no, man, I'm glad I finally was able to check the show out. I came across a list of cartoons, and I was like, okay, that's the name of the thing I always remembered and wanted to check out from when I was 8 or 9 and never did. So now in 2018, I can say I've seen the Maxx. Nice. So yeah, let's get out of here. Brad, where can people find out more about you when you're not recording this show?
So you can follow me on Twitter. It's @brad, or my blog is digitalhitchhiker.com.
Great. Guys, go check them out over there. You can follow me over on Twitter @JacobWilliams. And finally, if you want to follow any of the Toon Talk Weekly properties, we're all over the internet on Twitter @Toon Talk Weekly, Facebook.com/Toon Talk Weekly. Over on Google Plus is Toon Talk Weekly as well. I can't believe I'm still talking about Google Plus. It's so weird.
Still a thing.
Still a thing. It's still there. Yep. Yeah, usually they shut down their like stuff that doesn't have a huge following, but it's still there. So yeah. Email if you guys want to let us know more thoughts about the Maxx. Maybe I'd love to learn some more backstory, because I can't say that I'm ever going to go find or buy the 35 issues of the Maxx or whatever, but I would love to know more about the backstory. So toontalkweekly@gmail.com is the place to send us any messages if you guys have anything pertaining to that, or any other cartoons or comments you want to make over there. And finally, the homepage is toontalkweekly.com. You can find every episode. This is 240. Every time we break another 10, like I'm like, holy crap. still watched unique cartoons this long. ToonTalkWeekly.com has all the episodes as well as our video episodes. You can head on over to YouTube, hit that subscribe button, and help us out over there. It's a good way to support the show. So yeah, fun show. That's going to do it for this week's episode, but we'll be back next week with another cartoon.
Take care.
About the show, visit toontalkweekly.com or follow us on Twitter @ToonTalkWeekly.